Hi everybody, this is Nick. Today I'm going to come to you with a pretty long tutorial on how to make this chart. I'm going to try to go as fast as I can, but I want to make sure that you get all the details because it's such a fun chart type to show a change between 2 points in time. And this is an example of data that we use quite often. This is from a visitor experience or guest experience survey at a place like a zoo. And this is a really great alternative to something like a clustered bar chart that you might sort of automatically gravitate to when you're trying to compare 2 points of time on a specific piece of data. But I really love this chart type because it gives you some information. It gives you sort of the points, the point estimate from the point 1 to point 2 in time, but then it also kind of visually shows you and whether or not something has increased or decreased with those arrows. So we can see that something has increased up here. The educational rating has increased, and we can also see sort of a magnitude of the increase. So like maybe, I don't know, it's probably around 88 or 87%, all the way up to maybe 95% or something right there. But then you can also see some of the items have much longer or much larger magnitude changes from point A to point B. Some have very tiny little changes like this one right here, our enjoyable rating. It did decrease from 2022 to 2023, but there's not even a line there. It's a very, very small increase, probably just 1 or 2 percentage points, probably within that margin of error or the confidence range that we have with these kinds of data when we're collecting surveys from visitors at places like zoos. So I really like this chart type. I think it's kind of cool. It's a little bit novel. It's not something that people are used to seeing, but I think once they do get used to seeing it, they are going to start really liking it and sort of asking for charts like this because it really gives you a nice visual snapshot right when you look at it. Because it's not a usual or typical chart type, I have added this sort of custom legend up here that I created in PowerPoint with shapes and text boxes. I wanted to show everybody that the start of the arrow indicates last year's rating, the end of the arrow indicates this year's rating or 2023, and then we have some color codes here. So an orange arrow pointing to the left means there was a decrease from last year. A blue arrow pointing to the right indicates an increase from last year. So I wanted to include that for any readers who might not be able to listen to my presentation, but maybe they are taking this as a standalone or printing this out or they see the image in some other piece of report. I'm going to go ahead and escape out of our PowerPoint slide, and I do want to give some credit over here. So I saw this type of chart posted by Steve Wexler over on LinkedIn, and he has a company called Data Revelations, also an awesome book, The Big Book of Dashboards. I think a few books maybe he has, and a great blog to go and follow. So on his post right here, you can see he talks about the arrow chart and how to make it. I think he's working mostly in Tableau. We're going to work in Excel and PowerPoint today for this type of chart. So thank you to Steve. Make sure to go to the links that I put in the comments below. I'm going to link to his LinkedIn and also to his blog and to his website where you can go ahead and check him out. Okay. So here's our PowerPoint slide. This is our finished slide. This is where we're going to be working from our blank slide right here. But first, I wanted to go over to Excel and sort of show you how these data need to be set up. This is going to be sort of built on kind of a connected dot plot. Or a dumbbell dot plot that we've made before in other tutorials. But likely when you have your survey data, you're going to have a few things ready to go. So you're already going to have summarized your survey data. These are our survey items right here, and then our data for 2022 and 2023. So let's just say these are representing percentage of agreement to, these are probably some standardized questionnaire items, and these are the percentages of visitors or respondents to our survey who've maybe selected the top 2 responses, maybe that 4 and 5 out of a 5 scale or something like that. So we have our 2022 data right here, our 2023 data right here, and then we have a few other columns that we have to set up. So you might as well just set these up in Excel, and then we're going to go ahead and paste them over into PowerPoint when we're ready to do that. So the first thing is the difference. So this difference is just a calculation. We want the difference between 2023, our most recent year, and 2022. So I'm going to go ahead and calculate this. Just type equals and then point to that 2023 cell minus 2022, push enter. Perfect, that's a 3% difference, and I'm going to drag this down. That's going to be responsive and copied down. Now you see we have some positive values and we have some negative values because some things have decreased from last year and some things have increased. Now I have the difference if positive and difference if negative, and so we're just going to use kind of a nested if formula. Well, it's actually not a nested if formula. We're just going to use the if function here. So we're just going to type in equals if, open your parenthesis. I'm going to point to this. If this cell is less than or greater or less than or equal to 0, I'm going to go ahead and say that, I'm sorry, this is going to be our difference of positive. So we want this to be greater than. So if that cell is greater than or equal to 0, I think the equal is important here. We don't want the color to change if it was 0. We only want it to change if it was negative. So I'm going to say greater than or equal to 0. Then I'm going to say return what's in this cell right here, E58 on my spreadsheet. And then if it's not that, then I'm going to put a comma there, and we're just going to return an error value. So to do that, you just type in NA and then open and close parentheses, and that'll give us an error value. Now push the close parenthesis one more time, and that's going to finish our if formula right there. Now this is our percentage, so let's change that to a percentage format, and then I'm going to drag this down, and now you can see that for the negative values we get these error messages. Excel will treat those error messages as kind of blanks when you have a chart. So if you are charting with error messages like that, they will show no values. It won't treat it as a 0. It'll just treat it as absolutely nothing has been there, which is why it's important sometimes to put those in there. Now we need the difference if it's negative. So I'm going to go ahead and say equal if, open the parenthesis, we'll point to this cell right here. If that is less than 0, let's see. If that's less than 0, then we are going to return what's in this cell, or we're going to just return an error. So open close parenthesis and then close the parenthesis one more time, push enter, and now we have the error message there because the value is positive and we only want to show negative values here. I'll go ahead and update that to percentages. Now we have our 2 columns right here, which we're going to use for our error bars, and you'll see that once we get over to PowerPoint. The Y values here, this is just going to be the number of items that you have over here. There's nothing special about this. This is just going to be the number of lines or rows that we want to have in our arrow chart. So this is going to be 10. So I'm going to start with 10 here, and then 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So just all the way down in increments there. And then for the Y labels, this could update depending on how we want to change around the chart, but that's going to happen towards the end. So these are all just going to be zeros for now. So I'm just going to type in 0, and then I'm just going to go ahead and drag that down. So now we have all 0. So we have our data set up how we need to set it up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and highlight this whole bunch of data right here. I'm going to push copy, and then we're going to go over to our PowerPoint slide here. And under, if you're working on a PowerPoint slide, you could just insert a chart if you wanted to, or if you have a placeholder, a content placeholder here, let's just go ahead and click on the insert chart button. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go down to the XY scatter. This will all come from an XY scatter plot. So I'm going to go ahead and push OK. It's going to give me a canned or kind of a stock chart right here. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open this data source just a little bit more, and I'm going to paste in everything that I just pasted in from our Excel chart there. Now, you get a little error message. Go ahead and just say OK. Now what we need to do is, this is a dynamic table in Excel, and a whole bunch of things are not going to matter in this chart, as you can see right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead first and click on this little button here, Edit Data in Microsoft Excel. It's going to get rid of this pop-up window, and it's going to open a full Excel workbook that we can then work with. Sort of, let's see, insert a chart. You must first close any open dialog box. Oh, I think we have them all closed. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead, maybe I will close that Excel just for good measure and see if that works. It looks like it didn't really like it when it was open there. I'm going to go ahead, and now that Excel pops up right here. All right, so that's the reality of doing these tutorials live, right? So this is our Excel workbook here. Now you can see this little caret right here. This is all a dynamic table in Excel. And we know that because the table design tab is popped up here. I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna convert this to a range. I don't want all the properties that come along with a dynamic table here. So I'm gonna say convert to range, click yes. Now that table goes away. Let's go ahead and just minimize this a little bit so we can kind of see what's going on our PowerPoint slide here too. I'm just going to click over here so we can see. Now what we're going to need, let's go ahead to the Chart Design tab, and let's start editing this chart so it looks a little bit more like we need it to. Let's go ahead and say Edit, Select Data. The Select Data source pops up, and you can see all these different things. Now we don't want the difference, so I'm going to click on Difference and remove it. All of these other columns we don't need because those are our dummy columns that we've created variables for. And then we'll have to edit some things and add some things back in. But we want our 22 and 2023. So let's go ahead to 2022 and click on Edit. Now this Edit menu, this Edit Series menu is going to pop up. The series name, we can click on this, and it's already for 2022. That's perfect. Push Enter. Now the X values, this is what we want to update. We don't want the X values to be our item labels. We want them to be our values right here. So we're going to point there. And then our Y values, we're going to go over to our Y value column right here. And we're going to push Enter. Now we'll push OK. Now for 2023, we're going to do the same thing. So make sure that that name is right there, 2023, perfect. Now we have our X values here, perfect. And then our Y values. And we'll push it like that, click OK. All right, let's go ahead and click OK and see if our chart changes. Now you can see it has changed a little bit. We have two series of dots, and then we have to just do a whole bunch of formatting now. So let's actually just update the y-axis right here. You can see it's set so that it's on the major units are every 2. We're going to get a grid line here, but we want every 1 just so I can see some of those dots. So I'm just going to change that to 1 right there, and now you can see our 2 dots. Let's make the dots, the markers bigger. So let's go ahead and format the markers so that we can see them just for the purpose of this data here. I'm going to click on 15, and that looks pretty good there. Okay, so now what I want to do is we want to add the connecting lots, the connecting lines between the dots. And what we're going to do is we are going to use those calculated fields that we did to make sure that we have one that is positive and one that is negative. Now they have to be 2 different series of lines of error bars, because we want to make sure that one is colored orange and one is colored blue. If we use the same series of data for calculating those error bars, we couldn't manually update the colors of the lines and the arrows eventually. So let's just open this up. What we're going to do is we're going to right click, and we're going to say Edit in Excel again. The Excel source will pop up. Come on over here. So now what we need to do is I'm going to do this. So from the blue dot, sorry that Excel went away. Every time you click in PowerPoint, the other window goes away. So what we're actually going to do is we're actually just going to close this for now because it's going to open anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the blue on the lower dot here. What we're going to do here is select the error bars. So I'm going to go ahead and click on error bars. Now you can see we get a bunch of error bars. We don't need the vertical ones, so just delete them. And then the horizontal ones, we just want the positive values. So I'm going to click on this to get rid of that. I'm going to go over to the error bar menu option here, and I'm going to say plus. We don't want minus or both, we just want plus. I'm going to say no cap, and then I'm going to say custom down here under error amount, and we're going to click on specify. Let me drag this over so you can see this a little bit. We're going to click on the specify. Oops, where did they all go? Dun, dun. We're going to have to add these back, it looks like. I'm going to get back the error bars. And what we need to do there, once we have that error bar menu back, we're going to say specify value, and it's going to open up, and I just want the positive value right here, the positive value, and it's going to be the difference of positive. So I'm just going to drag that down, and that's going to be my one connecting line. Just push OK and be done. Perfect. Now we can see this is starting to take some nice shape. Now I'm going to go ahead and edit the line. So I'm going to make it pretty big. Let's say maybe all the way up to 5 points. And then I'm going to turn it blue. I want it to be that blue color. And then I want the arrow. I want the arrow, right? The blue arrow. So what we're going to do under begin arrow type, I'm going to actually keep the begin arrow type just a straight line. And then the end arrow type right here, I'm going to say arrow. Now you might have to click between both of those just to see which ones will work for you, but that's the one that worked for me. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the blue dots again, and I'm going to get rid of those markers. Under marker options, we'll say none. Now we have some blue arrows here that are pointing upwards, indicating the increase. So cool. Now let's go ahead and do this again. I'm going to add error bars to this series of dots right here. And let's go ahead and click the skittle there, click on error bars. I'm going to get rid of the vertical. We just want the horizontal, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say minus now. We just want the minus, the ones that are going from right to left. And I'm going to say no cap, and we'll say custom, specify value. And we're gonna now, instead of pointing to that other column, the difference of positive, we're gonna point to the difference of negative. So that'll give us a whole new set of error bars. And oops, you can see right here under the custom error bars, it says positive error value or negative error value. I'm gonna delete this because I want these to only be in the negative. So we're gonna go ahead and just do that. Push enter, push OK, and close out of that source. And now you can see our few lines right here. Now we can go ahead and edit these lines. We're going to make it a 5-point weight, and we'll make it orange. And then we're going to add the arrow type. I think this time the arrow type has to be the begin arrow, so I'm going to go ahead and put that. So the arrow now is going towards the left. And now I'm going to click on the dots again so that we can get rid of those markers. We'll say none. Now you can see we have a really nicely shaped arrow chart, a nice little start of that chart going for us. Now the thing that we need is we need to have our labels, right? So that's where we have the label calculated field. So I'm going to go ahead, we're going to open on the chart design tab, click on select data. We'll open that select data source again, and now we're going to add a new source. We're going to say add, the series name is going to be Y labels, the X values are going to be to the zeros, push enter, and the Y values are going to be the Y values. Same thing that we've done the whole time, just the 10, 9, 8. It's going to put those each onto one of those lines. We'll go ahead and click OK. I'm going to say click OK. And I'm going to close out of this. And you can see nothing right now, but that's because there are kind of ghost markers right here. If I click here, you'll see that I have some markers right here, some data markers. Let's go ahead and right-click those and say Add Labels. And then click on those. Instead of the label formatting being the Y values, let's say value from cells. And then we're going to point to all of our survey items right here. Perfect. And we will go ahead and close out of it. Now we're getting somewhere. See, we're cooking. So now the other thing that I want to do, there's a couple ways that you can fix this. You can see that we go all the way from 10. We have one more up here at 11 on our y-axis right here. I really just wanted to go to 10. So let's go ahead and make sure that the minimum stays at 0 and the maximum is at 10. Now I'm going to show you what happens here. Now when we do that, you can see over here the top line, the arrow, because it's so big, it gets cut off. So what we could do is just increase the maximum to like 10.3 and then see if that creates a space for that arrow, and it does. So I'm going to go ahead and keep it at 10.3 and make sure that the bottom is still 0. The minimum is still 0. And I don't think we need the y-axis anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and just delete it, push backspace. Now click on the data labels here for the y values, and I'm going to go overhead to the Format Data Label menu. We'll change the position. Let's do it to the left, and then click in the plot area so that you can drag this over and just make it look a little bit nicer. Now this is some formatting here, so I'm going to make this a little bit darker of a font. Let's go ahead and bold it. This is Aptos font, the new Microsoft default, which looks so much nicer, I think, than Calibri. It'll be a few years, I guess, before we all get sick of Aptos, right? Okay, so this looks pretty good. Now the other thing that I can do is add a little bit of interpretation here. What I really want to do is we could sort this by like the greatest magnitude of increase or decrease if we wanted to, or we could just sort it. I think it's easier to sort it by the sort of greatest to least from the most recent set of data, so our 2023. So that's how I have it set over here. You can see the highest value in 2023 is over here, and it just goes from top to bottom like that. So let's go ahead and do that. So what we're going to have to do here is we would just right click and then edit data in Excel, and to sort it we just sort that data from the actual data source here in Excel. So what we'll do is highlight. In this case, because this is a scatter plot, all I need to do is highlight this section to sort just this section. The Y values can stay the same and the label values can stay the same too, because those are all just the horizontal line positioning, and if I sorted those, then all of those lines will kind of get out of whack. So just go ahead and sort these data right here, and we will right click, click on sort and custom sort, and I'm going to go ahead and sort by 2023, and let's say largest to smallest. Okay, and that sorts everything. It looks good. I'm going to say close, and we can look at it. Yeah, it looks like it worked out pretty well. That's pretty awesome. Now let's go ahead and just update a few other things here. I'm going to go ahead and make those a little bit bolder, and maybe another point larger, up to 14. I think that looks pretty nice. Now, the thing is, if you didn't want to have, what I think I might actually do here is I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to get rid of our line there. It doesn't look like that did, because the 0 is also a grid line, so it's not going to always get rid of all the grid lines unless you get rid of everything. So you could get rid of all the horizontal grid lines if you wanted to. I think because there's so much space between the items and the item labels and the data, it makes kind of sense to keep some of those horizontal grid lines in there. But the other thing that you could do is you could update the chart. So one way to update the chart would be to update the minimum axis. And we could say, let's start the axis at, let's say starting the axis at 30%. When we do that over here, we can say 0.3 is the minimum. And when we do that, the labels go away, because remember, the labels are actually just fake data. They're just fake data set to zero, an x-axis value of 0. So what you could do here is we could just go ahead and open that data source again, and we're just going to have to update that value in our source. So instead of the y labels being 0, we could say 0.3. And then once you do that, we can start seeing all of our values, our labels coming back. So we could also do it like this, and this will show kind of a greater magnitude. I think as long as your x minimum and y are labeled, I think that's okay. It's not, you know, being deceitful or deceptive with your data in any way, as long as those things are labeled there on the chart. Now you might get people in your audience who are real sticklers for that. They want it to start at 0, but you can also just kind of have them, you know, get out of their own ways a little bit. Just make sure that they know that this chart here goes from 30 to 100%. Just to show the differences in the data. But the reality is that each of these items could be on a scale of 0% to 100% there as well. If you wanted to add direct labels to these, you could also do that. So one of the things that you could do, one of the things I like about this technique is that all of these are where we still have those sort of ghost dot markers right here. And if we wanted, we could add these labels. I'm going to go ahead and just change to the left, and then we'll update it with the x value. And then we could go ahead here and add labels just like that. So you can get the actual data if you want to as well. Now, I don't know. I don't really like this too much because it doesn't really, the labels are a little bit farther away from the arrows than I would like. And so I feel like your eye is probably drawn to this 65%, and you think this is 65% on the chart, but actually 65% is the tip of the arrow. If you wanted to, you could kind of make those go to the center, but then they go over the arrow, and that kind of defeats the purpose of the arrow. So you can sort of play around with that formatting and play around with specific labels. Maybe you just have one specific piece of data that you want to, or one specific pair that you want to highlight here, and maybe that's the only one that you would like to put a label on so that people can have a little bit better interpretation there. I'm going to bring back the horizontal grid lines just to see what we can do with those, because I do think it's kind of valuable to have them as a leader, kind of a visual leader from the item over to the arrow. So I'm going to actually just make them very, very white, very light. Just kind of mute those. And then I don't know, I'm going to probably get rid of the horizontals too. I think that maybe makes a little bit of sense, but also maybe not. This is where you have to just keep clicking back and forth and go go with what sort of works visually for you there. Let's go back over here to my first one. You can see I do have the vertical grid lines and the horizontal grid lines. They're very, very muted and they're very, very light, so they're not distracting, but you can see them. And this one does go from 0 to 100%. I just know that my audience is probably going to want that, so I'm going to keep that there for now. And I just really love this chart type. I think it's pretty cool. So thanks again to Steve Wexler for the inspiration on this chart type. I hope that you all like this video. If you do, make sure to give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button and the bell next to it. You'll get notified every time I post a new video in data design, usually Excel, PowerPoint, or Word. If you want the PowerPoint file for the chart that I just made right here, you can go ahead and right click, and you can kind of look at the nuts and bolts of how this was set up. You can go ahead and download it from my Gumroad site. I'll put that link below as well. So I had a great time making this for you. I hope you had a great time watching, and I can't wait to see you all next time.